Protests turned deadly in Iran. Thousands of pro-reform demonstrators in the streets of Tehran defying Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and warnings of a crackdown. The violence erupting again in the wake of the disputed presidential elections last June. So does this new wave of protest mean revolution might be coming? Jim Walsh is an international security and Iran expert, also a research expert with the MIT Security Studies program. Jim, you have suggested that there are echoes of the revolution that tossed out the Shah in Iran here.
Well, I think every Iran watcher thinks that what's happened over the last several months is the most significant event in Iran since the 1979 revolution. And it's very hard to predict going forward. You know, political science, social science, good at explaining what has happened in the past when there are changes in government, not good at predicting the future, the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of other countries. So what you can see right now, though, is that escalation is happening on all sides. The government is escalating. The protesters are escalating. Unfortunately, there's even more room for escalation on both sides. And where that leads, you don't know. At the end of the day, the government has the guns, and that may be enough for them to stay in power. But I think all options, all possibilities are on the table.
Well, and when they're firing into the crowd, I mean, that's a pretty extreme use of their ability, their force.
That's right. This is the first time that you've really seen shots fired into the beginning of a protest. That is how the nephew of Mr. Mousavi, who is the presidential candidate, his nephew was killed yesterday, a prominent leader of the opposition killed. We have at least reports of martial law in several cities outside of Tehran, so geographically things seem to be happening outside of the city center. But I want to hasten to add, John, that the government, if you look at the history of Iran, the government has lots of room for further escalation. During the Iran-Iraq War, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people executed by the government, including political prisoners. There have been calls by some government officials to arrest the former presidential candidate who is now head of the opposition. And for their part, the opposition protests are not dying. They're continuing to happen and happen in more places. Where this goes is very hard to predict, but both sides seem committed to going forward.
You know, every time we see Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, he seems relaxed. He's seen smiling in his sort of leisure suit that he always wears. But he's got some tremendous problems, not only outside with the international pressure on that country's nuclear program, but also obviously foment within.
You're right, John, and that's sort of the key with respect to the nuclear negotiations. That is, if Iran is having all these problems internally, that may create an incentive for the government to say, let's settle up this nuclear stuff, let's get this monkey off our back, the international community, so that we can focus internally on our internal problems. But it may also give them an incentive as that leadership base shrinks and shrinks to want to pursue the nuclear program more aggressively. Again, very hard to predict. And Ahmadinejad not only has reformist critics, protest critics, but within the conservative camp, there are hardliners that have criticized him. He was, in fact, in favor of that Tehran research reactor nuclear deal, and then when he brought it home to Iran, he was attacked by people in his own party for having, quote, sold out Iran. So he has lots of critics on every side of the electoral divide.
So if you were advising President Obama on what to say, what to do in reaction to these murders in the streets, really, of demonstrators, what would you tell him?
Well, I think that they've done a pretty good job so far. They've put out the message that this is unacceptable behavior, that any decent thinking person rejects the use of violence, indiscriminate violence against men and women and children who are expressing their political views. But he has not crossed the line. If Obama says, I'm going to directly help the protesters, that's going to help the government, because the government line on this is there really isn't a problem here. It's all because of foreign plots, the British and the Americans and their plotters and the CIA agents trying to overthrow us. So it is wise for Obama to keep some distance, even as he establishes a principle that this is unacceptable behavior in any country.
Jim Walsh, thanks.